We've looked at the 10 players who seem to be most likely to win the MVP award this season, and now we're doing the same for the Defensive Player of the Year award. These guys are ranked in order from number 10 being least likely, and number 1 being my pick to actually win it, number 10, in DeJounte Murray. DeJounte Murray's a great individual defender, and honestly one of the best one-on-one defensive players in the NBA. He's quick on his feet and can guard the 1 through the 3. He's going to give any star player a hard time this year when given the opportunity. And if the Spurs make the playoffs, he's going to be a huge difference maker for them, and a guy that they didn't have available last year. But as for the regular season, he's his team's best defender by far, and I think the difference he's going to make this year is going to be clear enough for him to get voted at least in the top 10 for the Defensive Player of the Year award. I mean, the last year he was healthy, he made the all-defensive second team as a second-year player. He doesn't rank any higher though, because while he is great one-on-one, he's not a guy that the entire team's going to plan around on that end. Maybe in a couple years though. Number 9, Jimmy Butler. This year's Miami Heat team is stacked full of young talent, and if things go right, they'll have one of the brightest futures in the league pretty soon. But to go along with all these young guys, I think Jimmy Butler's going to make a glaring difference on the defensive end. And it's going to be noticed by everyone. He's been one of the best defenders in the league for a few years, with how he can defend in the post, on the fast break, one-on-one, and switch onto bigger and smaller players. And it's going to be his job to stop the other team's best player night in and night out for Miami. A lot of like what it was for him last year in Philly. But even with all that, Jimmy's never really been anywhere near the top of the rankings for the Defensive Player award. I have him inside the top 10 now though, because I feel like he's going to have a contagious effect on that end with all this young talent, and that it'll shine through and make them overall a better team. Number 8, Miles Turner. Turner turns out to be one of the most underrated defensive players in the league. He's the anchor on the Indiana Pacers, and while his game isn't completely well-rounded, defense is what he takes pride in, and he's been great in that department since coming into the NBA. He's able to switch onto guards, play opposite of the pick and roll to perfection, alter and block shots, defend in the post, and really just excel in almost every aspect you can think of. And last year was his best year on that end, where he recorded a league-high 2.7 blocks a game. But it's better than that, because the man recorded a blocked shot on 8% of opponent possessions while he was on the floor. And if 8 doesn't sound like much, just know that it was one of the most efficient shot blocking seasons of the century. And being led by him, the Indiana Pacers allowed the fewest points per game last year out of every team in the league with 104. But sadly, Turner didn't even make an all-defensive team last year. I mean, it makes sense when you look at who made it over him, and that's why he falls down to number 8. Because of the competition ahead of him, and because as a whole he's still not getting the recognition he deserves, and we don't know if that'll change this season or not. Number 7, Draymond Green. And here we have our first former Defensive Player of the Year in the video, for when he won it in 2017, the same year he led the NBA in steals. He's also a guy that's made either the All-NBA first or second defensive teams for the past 5 seasons. And for as bad of a season as he realistically had last year, he still finished tied for 6th in the Defensive Player of the Year voting, right alongside Kawhi Leonard. And you can't tell me that with all of that being said, Draymond Green isn't a guy that deserves to be ranked here. With virtually everyone gone from the Warriors last year, including Klay Thompson for the most of the season, the defensive side of things really is going to fully rely on him. I mean, I can't even tell you who their second best defender is at this point, and with that said, it's going to be up to Green to guard the other team's best player night in and night out for all of the 82 games that he plays. He possibly would have been ranked higher if he also wasn't going to be so heavily relied on to score points and be a leader with the roster that they have. And based on that is why I think it's fair to rank him as the 7th player most likely to win the Defensive Player award this year. I mean, if the Warriors keep playing as bad as they have to start this season, I've said this all for nothing. But I do have hope they'll turn things around, hopefully. Number 6, Joel Embiid. So far this year, Philly looks like they can without a doubt live up to the hype of having the dominant defense they were expected to. And that's no surprise with Richardson, Simmons, and Horford in the starting 5 with Embiid. And if things keep up like this, Embiid has a real shot at the award as one of the very top few defenders in the league within the 3-point line. I mean, for example of just how good he was last year, with Embiid on the floor, the 76ers had the 3rd best defense in the NBA. And without him, that dropped down to the 5th worst. And it was no coincidence because the same thing happened in the playoffs, with them having by far the best defense with him and the 3rd worst without him. I mean, big men hesitate to shoot when he guards them, and guards think twice about driving to the basket with him under the rim. If Philly truly can have the best defense in the league, then it would only make sense for their best defender to be right in on those conversations. But again, just like for the MVP award, his ability to stay healthy and play a lot of games is going to play a role on whether or not he can get voted in as the Defensive Player of the Year. Number 5, Kawhi Leonard. And here is when things get pretty tough. In my opinion, I would say that the former 2-time Defensive Player of the Year is the best overall defender in the NBA. And he won both of those awards while he was still playing with the Spurs Big Three, but since taking on bigger roles on teams, he's fallen back in the standings for the award. The season after he won the award in 2016, Tim Duncan retired and Kawhi Leonard then averaged 25 points a game as the leader of the Spurs, and fell back to finishing 3rd in the Defensive Player of the Year voting. He was injured that one full season, and then this past year on the Raptors, as the clear leader, he averaged 27 a game and fell back to 6th in the rankings and to making the all-defensive 2nd team. Now don't get me wrong, I would be 0% surprised if by the end of this year he ends up winning it, but with him even more so now taking on a bigger role on offense and as a leader of a team, I wouldn't be surprised for him to not be too high up in the discussions this year. Plus he has people on the team to help take off some of the workload on that end. But we'll get to that in a minute. Number 4, Giannis. Last year Giannis finished in 2nd for the award and completely deserved to, if not actually win it. He was ranked 1st in individual defensive rating and defensive win shares, while being on the best defensive team in the league. And while he's not necessarily known for being a guy that's put on the other team's best player to lock them down, he's 6'11" and can guard anyone from Steph Curry to Joel Embiid, which is insane. And he's a guy that instead of just affecting individuals, he affects entire teams' game plans with his long arms that can defend threes from a mile away, switch onto pick and rolls, and catch anyone with a chase down block on a fast break. And with all that being said, it was hard not to pick Giannis as the favorite for the award, but I think these 3 guys ahead of him may deserve it more. Like number 3, in Rudy Gobert. Same as with the MVP video, it's weird to not put the person who won this award, not only last year but the past 2 years, as the person to most likely win it this season. Especially when you factor in just how much Utah revolves around Gobert. On top of the fact that he's probably still the best shot blocker in the league, and is just entering his prime. He's been getting better every single season, just like he'll probably do this year, which means everyone else is going to have to step up that much more if they want to knock him off. So there's a real chance he three-peats this year, and it's very possible. But I do feel like that with how this offseason goes down, this award is gonna go to someone else. And one person it could go to is number 2, with Anthony Davis. Ever since AD came out and said he's going for the Defensive Player Award this season, he's convinced a lot of people that he might actually do it. And while I think he can make a great case for it, I'm not totally convinced he can win it, which is why he only ranks in at number 2. But then again, I could be wrong. I mean, he's averaged 1.4 steals and 2.4 blocks a game over his 7-year career in the NBA. A combination that's by far better than what anyone else in the league today has been able to do, let alone maybe in NBA history. Usually players excel in one or the other, but very rarely in both. And that's not even to mention what his impact on the Lakers will be. While him and LeBron will share the load on offense, with him possibly being the best player on that end, him and LeBron won't be sharing any of the load on defense, so he's gonna have to be the best player on that end as well. And I think he's gonna be a huge threat in every aspect of LA's defense. I mean, him winning the award is really just gonna come down to how well they are as a team. I mean, Davis had great defense in New Orleans, but never even came close to winning it because his team sucked. So his chances at the award relies fully on how well the Lakers finish out the season in terms of overall team defense. But with that said, number 1 goes to Paul George. Choosing between Davis and PG was tough. I mean, choosing between the top 5 in general was tough already, but these two especially. And I think George has a slight edge here because, as I mentioned earlier, Kawhi Leonard may not be as much of a standout on defense this year since he's been put in more of a leadership role, which leaves the door fully open for Paul to excel on that end and take the pressure off of Kawhi. We know that PG-13 nearly won it last season while averaging 28 points a game, and I feel like the perfect role for him this year would be for him to be the secondary player on offense and the primary player on defense, which, like I said, could ultimately lead to Paul George being your 2020 Defensive Player of the Year. And that's my take on it, but I want to know yours too, so comment your thoughts on who will win the award. And after that, make sure to go check out sportsbettingdime.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next video.